Hello, my name is Mikaela Dowling. Welcome to 100 Stories Deep. I've chosen this story today in honour of Black Lives Matter and most particularly in remembrance of one Breonna Taylor. This is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Chapter 4. What sets one southern town apart from another, or from a northern town or hamlet or city high-rise? The answer must be the experience shared between the unknowing majority, it, and the knowing minority, you. All of childhood's unanswered questions must finally be passed back to the town and answered there. Heroes and bogeymen, values and dislikes are first encountered and labelled in that early environment. In later years, they change faces, places, and maybe races, tactics, intensities, and goals. But beneath those penetrable masks, they were forever the stocking-capped faces of childhood. Mr. McElroy, who lived in a big rambling house next to the store, was very tall and broad, and although the years had eaten away at the flesh from his shoulders, they had not, at the time of my knowing him, gotten to his high stomach or his hands or feet. He was the only black person I knew, except for the school principal and the visiting teachers who wore matching pants and jackets. When I learnt that men's clothes were sold like that and called suits, I remember thinking that somebody must have been very bright, for it made men look less manly, less threatening, and a little more like a woman. Mr. McElroy never laughed and seldom smiled, and to his credit was the fact that he liked to talk to my Uncle Willie. He never went to church, which Bailey and I thought proved he was a very courageous person. How great it would be to grow up like that, to be able to stare religion down, especially living door next to a woman like Mama. I watched him with the excitement of expecting him to do anything at any time. I never tired of this or became disappointed or disenchanted with him, although from the perch of age I see him now as a very simple and uninteresting man who sold patent medicine and tonics to the less sophisticated people in towns, villages surrounding the metropolis of stamps. There seemed to be an understanding between Mr. McElroy and grandmother. This was obvious to us because he never chased us off his land. In summer's late sunshine, I often sat under the chinaberry tree in his yard, surrounded by the bitter aroma of its fruits, and lulled by the drone of flies that fed on the berries. He sat in a slotted swing on the porch, rocking in his brown three-piece, his white Panama nodding in time with the whir of insects. One greeting a day was all to be expected from Mr. McElroy. After his good morning, child, or good afternoon, child, he never said a word, even if I met him again on the road, in front of his house, or down by the well, or run into him behind the house escaping in a game of hide and seek. He remained a mystery in my childhood. A man who owned his lands, and the big many-windowed house with a porch that clung to its sides all around the house. An independent black man, a near anachronism in stamps. Bailey was the greatest person in my world, and the fact that he was my brother, my only brother, and I had no sisters to share him with, was such good fortune that made me want to live a Christian life just to show God that I was grateful. Where I was big, elbowy and grating, he was small, graceful and smooth. When I described our playmates as being shit colour, he was lauded for his black velvet skin. His hair fell down in black curls and my head was covered with black steel wool, and yet he loved me. When our elders said unkind things about my features, my family was handsome to a point of pain for me. Bailey would wink at me from across the room, and I knew it was a matter of time before he would take revenge. He would allow the old ladies to finish wondering how on earth I came about. Then he would ask in a voice like cooling bacon grease, "Oh, Mrs. Coleman, how is your son? I saw him the other day and he looked sick enough to die." Aghast, the ladies would ask, "Die? From what? He ain't sick." In a voice oilier than the one before, he'd answer with a straight face, "From the uglies." I would hold my laugh, bite my tongue, grit my teeth, and very seriously erase even a touch of a smile from my face. Later, behind the house by the black walnut tree, we'd laugh and howl. Bailey could count on very few punishments for his consistently outrageous behaviour, for he was the pride of Henderson Johnson family. His movements, as he was later to describe those of an acquaintance, were activated with oiled precision. He was also able to find more hours in the day than I thought existed. He finished chores, homework, read more books than I, and played group games on the side of the hill with the best of them. He could even pray out loud in church, and was apt at stealing pickles from a barrel that sat under the fruit counter and Uncle Willie's nose. Once when the store was full of lunchtime customers, he dipped a strainer, which we also used to sift weevils from the meal and flour, into the barrel and fished for 2 fat pickles. He caught them and hooked the strainer onto the side of the barrel where they dripped till he was ready for them. When the last school bell rang, he picked up nearly dry pickles out of the strainer, jammed them in his pockets and threw the strainer behind the oranges. We ran out of the store. It was summer, his pants were short, so the pickle juice made clean streams down his ashy legs, and he jumped with his pockets full of loot and his eyes laughing. How about that? He smelled like a vinegar barrel or a sour angel. After our early chores were done, while Uncle Willie or Mama minded the store, we were free to play the children's games as long as we stayed within yelling distance. Playing hide and seek, his voice was easily identified, singing, "Last night before, 24 robbers at my door. Who all is hid? Asked me to let them in. Hit 'em in the head with a rolling pin. Who all is hid? In follow the leader, naturally the one who created the most daring and interesting things to do. And when he was on the tail of the pop the whip, he would twirl off the ends like a top, spinning, falling, laughing, finally stopping just before my heart beat its last, and then he was back in the game, still laughing. All of the needs, there are none imaginary, a lonely child has. The one that must be satisfied is there's going to be hope, and a hope of wholeness is the unshaken need for an unshakable God. My pretty black brother was my kingdom come." In stamps, the custom was to can everything that could possibly be preserved. During the killing season, after the first frost, all the neighbours helped each other to slaughter hogs and even the quiet big-eyed cows if they had stopped giving milk. The missionary ladies of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church helped Mama prepare the pork for sausage. They squeezed their fat arm elbow deep in ground meat, mixed it with grey nose-opening sage, pepper and salt, and made tasty little samples for all obedient children who brought wood for the slick-back stove. The men chopped off the larger pieces of the meat and laid them in the smokehouse to begin the curing process. They opened a knuckle of the hams, and their deadly-looking knives took a certain round, harmless bone. It could make the meat go bad, and rubbed salt, coarse brown salt, it looked like fine gravel, into the flesh, and blood popped to the surface. Throughout the year until the next frost, we took out meals from the smokehouse, the little garden that laid cousin close to the store, and from the shelves of canned foods. There were choices on the shelves that could set a hungry child's mouth to watering. Green beans, snapped always right length, collards, cabbage, juicy red tomato preserves that came on their own steaming buttered biscuits, and sausage, beets, berries, and every fruit grown in Arkansas. But at least twice yearly, Mama would feel that as children we should have fresh meat included in our diets. We were then given money, pennies, nickels, dimes, entrusted to Bailey and sent to town to buy liver. Since the whites had refrigerators, their butchers bought the meat from commercial slaughterhouses in Texarkana and sold it to the wealthy even in the peak of summer. Crossing the black area of stamps, which in childhood's narrow measure seemed a whole world, we were obliged by custom to stop and speak to every person we met, and Bailey felt constrained to spend a few minutes playing with each friend. There was a joy in going into town with money in our pockets. Bailey's pockets were as good as my own, and time on our hands. But the pleasure fled when we reached the white part of town. After we left Mr. Willie Williams' Dewdrop Inn, the last stop before White Folksville, we had to cross the pond and adventure the railroad tracks. We were explorers walking without weapons into man-eating animals' territory. In Stamps, the segregation was so complete that most black children didn't really absolutely know what whites looked like. Other than that they're different, to be dreaded, and in that dread was included the hostility of the powerless against the powerful, the poor against the rich, the worker against the worked for, and the ragged against the well-dressed. I remember never believing that whites were really real. After reading this story, I might suggest an activity that could be to produce a piece of power art in honour of Breonna Taylor, and to be able to take that piece of art and perhaps upload it onto social media. If you look at hashtag Breonna Taylor on Instagram, there will be lots of inspiration that you could look at, which might inspire you to do your own piece of art. And as long as we never forget, hopefully, eventually, the policeman that committed the murder will be arrested. Thank you for listening. You can now watch and listen to more stories in the 100 Stories Deep series if you subscribe to the link below. Thank you. Bye.